Here.
Lanham. Here. Ashbrook. Here. Here. Walter present.
Okay, the purpose of this meeting is to discuss parks and recs and funding options. We'll start with citizens' comments. Is there anybody in the peanut gallery, which there isn't? Well, obviously there is, but anybody wish to speak? Okay, we'll get into our discussion. Do we have a, BJ, do we have a format, or are we going to let them present what they?
What we're going to do is go ahead and let the Parks Board open up with
Okay.
the purpose of this evening, some comments they have, and
All right.
we'll jump into discussion.
Very good. The floor is yours. Who's your main speaker tonight?
I will be the main speaker, but the way that we've kind of put this together, all of us have contributed to the information that you will receive tonight. So we requested this workshop. It's designed to answer the questions. Last time when I spoke to you, we had 17 or 18 slides, and we had cut it down from 40. So this is to go into depth, to be able to answer your questions about the permanent funding source for our community parks that we are requesting. The information packet that you have in front of you has been broken down into the specific improvements and requirements for each separate park with the associated cost outlined. In addition, there's some levy options and funding options provided in the packet. If you'd like to go through the packet, we can do that, or we can begin with specific questions. Mr. Hicken provided some early questions ahead of time, and everyone has the answers to those questions. So you have a copy of those questions along with those answers.
Thank you very much, by the way. That was quick turnaround time, and I was very grateful for you guys for flipping those around so quick.
So how would you like to proceed? Would you like to go through the packet that we have provided? Would you like to take a minute and look at the questions and answers that we provided for Mr. Hicken? PJ?
Did you have?
Oh, I was just going to say, if we started by just going through the packet, it may answer some of the questions that folks have up front. So potentially going through the packet and then having some discussion might be a good way to start.
I agree with Mel. I think going through the packet will help lay out what the vision for the parks are, Parks and Recreation, I should say. And I think it'll help answer some of the questions that have been asked or that council members may have. I think that's a great place to start to talk about. We're talking about raising or generating levy funds. So I think it'd be good to start from the base level. How would those levy funds be utilized, and what would they go towards in the parks?
So I'm going to skip the questions that are in the front of the packet, and we'll go directly to how our community parks, how we see the community parks fitting into the community. Of course, there's quality of life that's improved by that. There's a large community impact. Continue or stop? Okay. There we go. I'm good. You are good. There's a large community impact, and we have and also economic development. All of these things are affecting and are contribute to and are affected by whether we have a successful park program in the community. Who is my person? Who's going to talk about the survey? Grant, would you like to just review the highlights of the survey?
Sure.
just so that we get the community input from that to start with.
All right, I can talk about our survey that we took at the end of 2016. Some of the highlights from that. Our survey was online and consisted of 21 different questions. We had 446 participants that completed the survey, and we got a pretty good cross-section of the community within that survey. So some of the highlights of the park survey: 63% of residents were unaware that we had a total of 6 parks. That's actually the first question on there. So it was a factor of what residents were aware of what parks and what we had. Most park usage was in Old Pataskala, with little usage of the West Side parks. People are learning about their parks through the city website and Facebook, and also the city newsletter. That's where they're getting their information. As far as the top priorities for the parks, number 1, cleanliness and facility upkeep. Number 2, activities and attractions, programs. Number 3, safety. And number 4, accessibility. The most urgent attention the public felt the parks needed: number 1, walking and bike trails; 2, additional recreation; and 3, facility improvements. A summary: the understanding of park funding. One of the reasons for the survey was try to get an understanding of if the public understood the funding for the parks. The most common comment for the understanding of park funding was "don't know." Support for a park levy was also asked on the survey. It was at 0.75 mils on the survey. 70% yes, 22% no, and there was a non-resident reporting of 6.64%. They also asked a question about the Licking County Park and the levy support. 88% responded that no, they did not know we received no funding from the Licking Park District levy. The supported activities and facilities that the public was most interested in: number 1 was a city bike and walking path. Number 2 was a recreation center. Number 3 were nature trails. 4 was a dog park, and 5, adult programming. A couple other highlights: people feel strongly parks are safe, but they do want improvements. Are parks important to the Pataskala community and businesses? 96% voted yes, 3% said no. And the last question on the survey were: are parks important to the community? And 96% answered yes. That's kind of a summary of the overall input from our survey that we did in 2016.
Questions?
I have a question, Chairman. You mentioned something about non-resident reporting. How did the survey, are we sure that people were residents and non-residents? Was that self-reported, or?
It was self-reported on the survey.
Okay, so we assume there's some accuracy that folks A, know where they live, and B, were honest when they said they were a resident and non-resident. I'm just want to make sure that somebody in Pittsburgh wasn't chiming in.
Yes.
Okay, 'cause this was on the internet. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not trying. I just want to know what sort of controls there were to make sure that the numbers
It
that
was
you're
dependent
reporting.
upon their honesty, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it wasn't targeted just to residents. It was open on the internet for anybody to, if they chose to go to our website, Facebook page, or whatever, to fill it out. And there was nothing requiring them to register where they live. So it was self-reporting.
Okay. And somebody could have voted 3 times.
No.
No. Okay. I'm just curious as to what sort of controls there were.
Yeah, the program we use only allow. Let me back up. Yes, they could have, but they would have had to do it from several different computers.
Okay.
Because the program we use only allows one vote per IP address.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions at this point?
I'll ask one really quick. I didn't hear how many total respondents you had.
441.
Thank you.
I have another question. Do we know the names of the 441 people? Do we? Okay.
No, it was not a requirement to put your name.
Okay.
All right, so you can see there's 3 Ps highlighted, and for our community, there's parks, police, and potholes. So I started the discussion with you last time about how it is so visible that you're fixing the community roads and how important that is. Well, it's also important to the community that we're going to be maintaining our parks, and that is also something very visible. And another part of our community that's very visible are the police. So we kind of see this as the 3 Ps of a successful community. There's lots of really good things in this slide. There's some economic development that comes with bringing or making improvements to our parks, having good programs in our parks. And there's been several studies, several white papers on that. And Missy, are you prepared to talk about that a little bit? Yeah, the economic development.
In study after study, it's been shown that parks and open spaces improve property values. Quality parks and recreation are cited as one of the top 3 reasons that businesses cite as making relocation decisions. As recent as 2016, there was a combined income to annual economic activity to the tune of $200 billion, and that's with the combined National Park Services and state park systems, public parks, and local parks. So there's definitely economic impact, positive impact that can happen with great parks. I found it interesting that, well, we have an acronym for everything. So retired people are now referred to as Grampies. Grampies, yes. And so according to this report, Grampy stands for Growing Retired Active Moneyed People in Excellent Shape. So that's what Grampies stand for. Grampies want communities that provide leisure and recreation amenities. Retirees bring expendable income into their communities. If 100 retired households come to a community in a year, each with a retirement income of $40,000, their impact is similar to that of a new business spending $4 million annually in the community. They increase the tax base as positive taxpayers because they use fewer services than they pay for through taxes. For example, they pay taxes to school districts but do not send children there. The millennials are looking for communities that offer parks and recreation, probably more the recreation side of things. Sorry, I'm flipping looking through my notes here. I had everything ready to go. Studies have shown that municipal revenues are increased by providing parks and recreation. Property values are raised. Again, retirees and millennials are attracted and retained in communities that offer these services. Knowledgeable workers and talent are attracted to live and work in communities that have nicer parks and recreation facilities available to them. And then, of course, property values increase, so home buyers are also attracted to communities that offer these services. Real estate agents will tell you that that's one of their selling points, is if there is a park close to that property. Any other questions?
I don't have anything about economics.
Any questions?
Not yet.
All right. So we kind of hit on the residents. I want to recap here. The residents have said that they're interested. The residents that took the survey are interested in the parks. One of the things that what we didn't say yet is in the last, I believe it's 8 years, the participation in our recreation programs has gone from roughly 200, 250 to closer to 700 now. Is that the right number?
Well, it's almost 600 in
So
the
600
soccer
In
program
the soccer program
per season, 2 seasons.
per season. So we have numbers that are showing the participation rates are growing. At least in the recreation program, that it is, there's more kids getting out, there's more families coming to the parks, there's more residents enjoying the parks. So if we flip to the next slide, the millage. The current millage rate, and BJ, I believe this is the up-to-date numbers.
This is based on the most current valuation
Okay.
from the Licking County Auditor, who certified what our valuation in the community is, and it's based on the 1 mil.
There was a question about, I believe, and Mr. Hickens' questions was, is 0.75 the right amount? And I think that we have an idea of the reason why we are targeting that number, but when we get done tonight, if council feels like maybe that's not the right number, then we collectively need to determine what that right number is, especially with your input. But so we are targeting the 0.75 mil, and one of the reasons why it's less than 1. That's the reason why people say it's 99 cents. Well, okay, you guys have all heard that, right? It's 99 cents. No, really, it's $1. Well, $1 is sounds more than 99 cents, so anything less. So it's less than 1. We've also looked at the economics of it, and we feel like in a 10-year period with this additional funding that would fund a full-time person and a part-time person, that would help fund that, plus help us work on all of our backlog of projects. There's been a couple different ways that people have looked at slicing that pie on what that would look like, but at the end of the day, we don't see that if we raised it much more than that to go full support and have nothing from the general fund, we think that that would scare off the public. And we don't know that that would have a full, I don't know that we would get full participation from the public with that decision.
What do you think that millage amount would be?
We never looked at it that way. Without support from the general fund, we're getting roughly 160.
We get based on the financials that Jamie provided, we get roughly 150,000 over the course of the last 4 years. It seems like it's like he's having. But and that's from, a lot of that is from generation of emergency projects, things that must be done, things that weren't planned. Accurate way of if we were able to plan for where they broke. But if we take that number and then we look at, in your packet, we have each park broken down into maintenance, and then we also have it into some of the things we'd really like to see in the park. That roughly is $250 per year for 10 years. Comes out to $830,000 if we were handed a check tomorrow for everything. That would leave a little bit of money to start some new programs. And that would either be a passive program or active recreational program. So if I was, if the Powerball hit 7 or 8 million, I'd be thrilled, because that would be able to do everything tomorrow plus the rest of that. That's what I got. But essentially, based upon being reasonable, needed amount to support the parks. This is kind of where we landed with .7.
You mentioned before you've got 150 over the last 4?
Last 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5? I mean, are you anticipating that is roughly the same amount that you would continue to get from us, or do you guys think maybe we should give you more, or do you think maybe we should give you less?
Yeah,
I think this would, Jane, if you want to.
I would think that's going to go up
Hi, Jen.
because we have Dave now that we didn't have over the last 4 years. So that's outside of this levy that we're thinking of.
I'm thinking about what the city throws in, right? What we have to throw in from the general fund, if anything, versus what is raised via a levy. And then you've got a number per year, and so.
Part of the reasoning behind the levy is having it be a permanent funding source.
Mhm.
Because again, the flexibility that at each budget cycle, fortunate that, over the course of, hey, we need this, okay, we can provide that available. But again, it comes down to budget cycle. So if we had a permanent funding base, I guess is the way to look at it, then it would be match, meet, see a new program, see a new project. Council decides they want to take on something that's a little different. But at 5 level, we have some to take care of the parks and a little bit to do.
Good.
I have a quick, for BJ and Jamie. So the money that's generated for the parks right now, is that for when businesses and houses are built?
It's different pots. When businesses come in or a house is built, there certainly is the park impact fee, and that can only be used on capital stuff. It can't be used on operations, on wages, on recreation. It's got to be used on the bigger price items. Typically, we look at those things that have a life of 5 years or more that can be spent on.
Capital improvements for the parks.
Correct.
it's-
No operations.
It's the Park Use Fund.
Yeah.
We really have 3 sources of funding. The Park Use Fund, which is typically, like BJ said, capital type infrastructure improvements. There is a parks function in the general fund where, like, for example, today and this year, we're paying for Dave's salary we pay for a lot of the parks routine kind of maintenance out of. The other source is the recreation fund. The recreation fund is primarily user fees, but there is a contribution this year from the general fund of $10,000 to help seed that fund. So those are really the 3 pots of money that we have currently that we use for parks projects.
So on your little scale, what's that, the new houses and new builds for businesses, has that been,
Well, put it this way, if you do 50 new houses a year, and it's $400, I think, per house,
2,000 bucks.
that's $2,000.
Which is restricted for typically
Right.
larger.
So it's not a
improvement
big,
projects.
it's not a big amount of money.
okay. Okay, I'm clear on the three sources of funding now.
The trail itself, when we put the trail in at municipal, it all but wiped out
There you go.
the use fund. I mean, but like it went from something, one felt project, which is great, but it was quite expensive.
Just trying to get a handle on,
Well, and that's not even a paved trail, that is a
right,
mulch trail.
mulch trail, sure. Got you. Okay, yes, ma'am.
It would be helpful maybe if you guys could break it down like it was in the meeting where, you know, the levy funds over the year, what it would actually pay for. So we talked about, you know, if we paid for a full-time salary and a part-time salary, and then it left an amount of about, was it $60,000? Okay, so if you think over the course of a year, after they've paid for one full-time person and one part-time person, it leaves $60,000. Now, right now, we have a part-time person who just mows his behind off all day long. That's all he does. Mows and mows and mows. So when you say a full and a part-time person for all of our parks, that's really not a lot of people. Also considering that we take a lot of the manpower comes from our street department, who helps fill in and take care of a lot of the projects that hopefully our own parks department would be able to start to do. But when you leave behind, you only have $60,000 left. There's not much you can do with that. So when, instead of, if we want to just make it a little more simple and say, we have $60,000 a year approximately left over from a levy fund, how much would we need to supplement to hit projects with general maintenance and that sort of thing? Because you're talking about things that are falling apart that we have not generally maintained. Sorry, I'm going to get on a soapbox. The shelters need maintaining. The trails that you mow, they have to continue to be, kept. There's drainage issues. There's field issues. I mean, all of these things have kind of been get it as we can type of things, and not put in some type of a forecast so it is maintained and made better over time. It's just kind of holding tight.
Or left up to groups that come in and donate their time and money.
Yes, which is wonderful, because it's great, you have that community buying in the ownership. However,
You can't gauge.
Not
what-
sustainable.
it's not sustainable.
We don't ever know when they're going to come.
Right.
I have a question. I'm confused. So, a 3/4 mil levy is what we're talking about, right? And that's going to generate, according to these figures, $252,501 a year, right? And Ms. Carter just said that that would leave, after paying the employees, that would leave $60,000, which means you're paying the employees $190,000 a year, one full-time and one part-time. So I'm confused.
That's the same mill rate we talked about.
I would like to apply for one of those jobs, especially the part-time one.
I don't believe that's right.
Yes, because when we first discussed it, it was about $180,000. Right.
Yeah, they're looking at maintenance staff and also director position with that. When you look at the maintenance staff, and I'll use it as an example, full-time maintenance person being paid the first step, I guess you'll say, in the public service department labor position. When you add benefits and everything, you're at about $65,000 for that with family insurance. We always look at the worst, PERS and their wages. So when you look at that labor position, it's $65,000.
And so the payment that they're getting covers all of the work that they will be doing.
Correct.
So, it's not just that we're paying them and not getting progress.
The other thing I'll mention is, it's great that the Public Service Department helps out with doing projects in the parks, but at the same time, in a perfect world, if they're working in the parks, they should be being paid by park funds to do that stuff, and they're not.
Well, how many employees are we talking about? 3 or 2.5? Because now I thought there was one. I thought there was 1.5. I thought there was one full-time and one part-time. So that's two,
I would say maintenance.
so 2.5 people. Okay, all right. I thought we were talking about 1.5. I thought we were talking about 1.5 employees. and
Two
that was-
full-time and then part-time, and the part-time guy's the guy that's mowing?
The part-time guy is the guy who's doing whatever needs done in the parks while he's here.
Striping fields, setting up nets, whatever.
Plus mowing.
Plus mowing.
Whatever, the part-time guy and the full-time guy would do any maintenance that needs to be done in the
I'm not
park.
saying they're not working. What I'm saying is I thought we don't, I don't even know how many employees we're talking about here. I thought we were talking about 2.5 now, or 1.5. Now it's 2.5. And I'm just confused as to what the numbers are, for however many employees we have. If we know.
Can you break that down to your two full-times and your part-time? What are they making?
So.
What would they make?
When we were looking at this levy, we're not considering Dave's salary as being covered as under this levy. We were looking at that, how it's being covered now should continue to be covered that way. And that the way that we looked at it was, for the people, it was $100,000 to cover the personnel costs, which was a full-time and a part-time person. That would leave maintenance and other projects $150,000 for the total of $252,000. This was what we had presented to you when we first came to you a couple weeks ago. But we didn't want, since Dave's salary was already being covered under the general fund, we felt that it should continue to do that. Now remember, I think it's totally appropriate for city council to have complete buy-in as we move forward with our parks department, our parks program. And to do that, the general fund is going to have to be part of that program. It just is. We're not going to be able to exist without a contribution from the general fund. So when we were looking at this, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, Dave's salary was not part of the levy. That we were going for an additional person full-time and additional person part-time. So that would leave two full-time people total for parks and recreation programs, and one part-time seasonal person.
So just to summarize, so what you're saying is that the budget, the overall budget for the year, if you were to have a 0.75 levy, plus the essentially the support from the general fund to pay the administrator's salary, which is no different than what the streets departments are, what we do under RAMP or under the SWAMP programs, you would be somewhere in the $400,000 range total. That'd be the $250 plus what the general fund is funding at this point in time. Is that roughly about where you're saying that would be? And that's going to pay for the 2.5 people, as Todd was mentioning.
I thought it was 1.5.
Well, we went back, if you add in the general fund support.
Okay.
So you're up to 400. So in total. So you're talking the 2.5 people, plus you're talking about $150,000 in maintenance fees, maintenance costs, project costs, and those types of things. That's essentially where the money, as it breaks out. And if you don't have a levy, to keep it at the same level, it'd be $400,000 out of the general fund. And if you didn't do anything out of the general fund, then that obviously reduces, and did have a levy, that obviously reduces what you can do in projects. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yes. When Andy talks there about the 150, what do you guys think it takes to run, take that 150, we'll talk about salaries for a second. So you've got $150,000 left over, if that's the right term. What do you think it takes to run right now the parks at the level that they're at? Is it more than 150,000? Are you paying more? Are we paying more than $150,000 a year for the parks that we have?
Well,
Yes.
you're receiving more than $150,000. I can tell you, I'll answer that in two questions. One, if we were to run the parks, if we were to come out in March and be able to do the parks as we wanted, got all the mowing done, all the trees were cleared, all the everything that has been left and is still on our list, Dave's list. When I did a rough estimation, it was $1,000 if we were just to, if I was sitting in the park chair and I was able to cost estimate and get landscapers and everybody out of the gate for the projects just this year. So then, so what we end up doing is when we make our list, when Dave and I sat in January and made our list of things to do, we set aside projects that volunteer groups historically had covered. So we have multiple church groups that have just every year come forward, 30, 40 people. Tonight we have 10. And we looked at those projects, and we include the pool, because some of those are big and sometimes things are weather dependent. And if you look at, for example, Real Church this weekend, spent 3 hours. I don't know how much the mulch was, but between PRA's donation, a donation from Shirk Orthodontics, and the people they provided the city with $5,000 worth of park service right there on a Saturday. And that's using general labor costs, standard hourly wage. So if you think about every project, the project tonight is weeding and mulching and everything else, 3 hours. You've got 10 people back there. If you paid them $15 an hour under the table, you think about the impact that these groups have that would normally be part of what either we would have to pull from the street department to make it look aesthetically pleasing, because trust me, that looked awful, or we would have to not do it, which again would be something that would be dismissive, and it would be maybe not a fundamental loss, but somewhere in our picture, somebody would say, wow, I didn't want to rent that shelter, wow, I didn't really want to stop in Pataskala, depending on where it was. So 189 is what we were coming up with in January as far as contracts and if we had everything there plus whatever. And we had, I don't remember how many projects, Dave and I came up with 15 maybe projects, and these were big projects.
So I can help wrap my head around it. Can you tell me what that entails? Like
What is it?
what does it entail? The 180, you said if we did everything, are we talking about, I'm trying to get a grasp for like basic stuff, or are you talking about?
Some of it was CIP stuff
Uh-huh.
that has already been pushed forward, and that would be the top of the matrix. In other words, repair of municipal ball field,
Okay.
drainage systems at softball. I'm trying to think what else was on there.
The parking lot at Municipal,
Things stemmed off there, things that we didn't know if we could get done or not.
So those are like active improvements. Those are things that need to be improved are included in that, not just throwing down mulch and,
It's not
Not the
really
annual
as much
maintenance.
improvement as maintaining.
okay.
And that is not including adding a gaga ball court, or resurfacing the basketball courts, or putting up nets, or putting more sand volleyball. I think fundamentally we got to the end of the list and went, wow, there's really not a lot of recreation here. So this is stuff that is passive, necessary, aesthetic, quality of life things that you see first. And then when you join the recreational program, you see the rest. So, and we've been fortunate with multiple businesses helping with a lot of the stuff with soccer. So those were not included in that. So for Dave, in order for Dave to start a program, that wasn't part of it. He wanted to start lacrosse.
Given the success that you've had with soccer, it seems like, I put in my comments, it seems like you've done amazing with that, but it's kind of gobbled up your time.
It does, especially during the 2 seasons and the month prior to the beginning of the season, it does.
So-
It just takes a lot of time.
Apart from the seed money start, does it pay for itself?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all for
Any
now.
new program would be under the same situation where you have to have money to start it, to
Sure.
buy equipment, to do whatever, advertise for it, and then you set your rates of what the child would pay or the parents would pay to compensate for that. but there's a time lag between them.
Out of curiosity, if you if tomorrow I love lacrosse and I gave you money to start a lacrosse program, is soccer take so much of your time that it would be hard for you to do that?
Well, yes, and that's one of the things about the levy is that, and I'm really working hard on trying to develop a volunteer group for administration so that some of that time is taken away from me and I have time to do other things like planning and forecasting. But it's kind of a situation where your volunteers realizing that they're going to have to spend some reasonable amount of time with it, and so that cuts down on the people that are willing to do it. So right now I have 3 people volunteering to help me with the soccer program, and I mean it would be mind-boggling if I didn't have them, because it's just a lot of work. I've got an IT guy, I've got a field guy, and I've got a referee guy, Corey, who handle all those issues with having your student referees show up or not show up, and assigning what's going on and everything else. It takes a lot of time.
Thank you.
But may I add one thing, and this being first year 1, almost over, is that I really wanted to concentrate on making sure that the program stayed at the level it was when PRA ran it, so that there wasn't that back of your mind, hey, the city's taking it over and now things are going to, we're going to charge more and it's not going to be as good, and et cetera, et cetera. So I really spent a fair amount of time making sure that that did not happen.
Have you received any comments from community members while you're out there during soccer activities about, can they tell the difference? Have they made comments about grass? I mean, other than the fence, we can talk about the fence,
The gate.
Sorry, not a fence.
Gate.
So let's not talk about the gate, but like, what's some of the feedback that you're receiving from community members?
Actually, I sent out a blast email to everybody in the soccer program in the fall, asking for their comments, and I think we shared it with council. I don't recall exactly, but I had probably 40 responses, and out of those 40, only 2 were negative. And everybody else was, I didn't even know there was a change, other than the fact that they wrote their check to the city of Pataskala. And they said, that's how they knew that it was not exactly the same program. But other than that, it was exactly the same program.
Anything new in the spring?
So, the spring's been fine, other than weather. We've rained out 24 games in 4 weeks, but it is what it is, and lightning and thunder is lightning and thunder, and you can't play in it. So, but our comments have been actually very few comments, which is really a good thing when you think about it, because the only comments I'm getting now is, are we going to make these games up, and scheduling, and how we're going to do it, and we're going to do the best can to get 8 games in for every player. And some of the coaches are happy about that, and some of the coaches don't care whether they get that other game in. So we'll work with them all and see what we can do to make them all happy.
Thank you.
Got a couple questions.
Sure.
Mr. Ramsey, nice to meet you. Appreciate your comments there. That's kind of where I was headed with it was, you've had about a year, almost a year.
June 1st.
Fresh set of eyes on everything. I just kind of like to know, how do you feel about all of this? And I'm sure you, as a group, have been working together on this, but
We have.
what is your, kind of like, give us a little bit of your vision as far as, do you think, an example would be, do you think this is enough? Do you think 0.75 is enough? Is there things on here that haven't been identified that you as the Parks Director would?
Well, first, let me go backwards a little bit and say that, at this point, the Parks and the rec program's not that large when you consider the fact that it's adult softball and soccer. It's run well and it's well known, and it's if you ask people out there, what do you know about the rec department, they'll say soccer.
Right.
Because that's our one thing. We want to keep that going. Secondly, I would say that, the parks that we have in the city are, reasonable. But there's a lot of work to do, and if we don't do something on funding those things, we're not going to keep up with maintenance and appearance and all those kind of things, which are all negative things. So I believe that this funding, from the mental standpoint of 0.75 versus 1, I think people do feel that way, that 0.75 is more reasonable than 1. The second thing I think is that we've identified, Ann and I have identified a number of projects that we know are going to happen or need to happen. And with the amount of money, and forget about the employees and all this stuff, but let's say that we get $150,000 to use for the Parks and Rec Department. We've probably got $1 million plus projects that we could be doing to make things better and make things more attractive to the people. So if you divide it out, you're looking at 8 or 9 years of time before you get to the last project, which obviously there'll never be a last project, but just thinking about it, when you're saying, you know, we want to do something and it's going to cost $75,000 and it may be low priority, it's not going to get done for 7 or 8 years, like the ramp project, where you determine what needs to be done and when it needs to be done and how much money you have.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that I see. You know, it's not going to be like we do this millage and everything's done in 2 years. Not going to happen. But it'll give us a start and keep the maintenance from going downhill instead of trying to get ahead of the maintenance program and make sure that things are nice. And, you know, I've got restrooms and things that need to be cleaned up for car park back there. We've got 8 or 9 people from a church right there trying to make car park look nicer. Volunteers, I don't know whether Ann used the figure, but I estimate that volunteers probably generate a savings of $60,000 a year. And that's nice, but unfortunately, they don't exactly come when you want them to come. They come when they want to come. And so you can't count on them.
Right.
And I try to provide most of the things that they need to do a project. If they're staying in a place, then I get their stain for them, and I get rollers and that kind of stuff, so that basically they provide the labor, and we provide as much of everything else that we can. So I think the 7.5 is a very reasonable number. I think it gives us more likelihood of passage. And I think it gives us a time slot of 7, 8 years to get the projects that we've already identified, get them done.
Thank you.
I don't mean to cut in. I have to leave.
No, go ahead.
I have a prior-
Did you have another
so
question?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you. It was really helpful to me, but I'm sorry that I have to leave early, but
All right, I'm
thank
going to
you.
leave here shortly, too.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I haven't had any of it. Do you want some?
No,
more?
thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have one other question, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
So, and please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I'm still trying to wrap my brain around all this, and I've looked at it 5 times. So, am I correct by saying that with the 0.75, about, and this goes along with kind of your question, Todd, about $60,000 of that would go towards the project?
I'm thinking it's a little more than that.
So, look,
More than that.
It's about 100,000 per year.
We divided out what I figured out what happened was we have maintenance
Yeah,
and
where's it?
projects and
so of that,
Maintenance.
What, and you,
These
You-
are the numbers that we were looking at.
yeah, I was
Here's
looking
now-
for that packet.
you also have to remember that that means status quo from my salary and where it's coming from now.
Yeah,
But that doesn't change.
that's what I was looking for, and it wasn't in there.
The maintenance and projects were included in the initial presentation. And then when we divided it out, we figured out what maintenance was based upon what we've spent in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I had that packet, and for some reason that sheet was not in there. But I saw it before, and that's what I was wanting to see. So about $100,000 of the 252 goes to personnel, and I get that it costs money
Yeah.
to run things. Totally understand, but this makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, because I was thinking that more of that 252,000, or the 252 was going towards personnel, and what I was worried about is if we're going to sell this to the public, they're going to want to see new things. They're going to want to
Yes,
see.
they are.
They're
And
going
they're
to want
gonna
to see
wanna
where
see
their
them.
money's going, and if they found out, I'm not saying. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying that the labor is not needed or worth it. I get it. But to the public, perception is reality, and if they found out that more money was going towards labor than it was towards the project, I think that would be a hard sell.
But think about this, with the labor, you will be able to see
Sure.
improvements and
I get that.
relatively quickly, like painting some of the facilities and cleaning up the restrooms and things like that. Those can be done very quickly with the money we have and are very obvious to people that are here.
Totally understand that. And this is the sheet that I was looking for, and it was in the This makes me feel more comfortable because I had in my head my numbers were not the way this is. So
And
thank you.
one of the other feelings, and I think it's been mentioned before, is
Unless
that
you got
the
Tom.
street department right now is
Tom's
filling
over
in for us. And so now, all of a sudden, the street department will be able to get more projects of their, more done.
And I think part of that is too, we haven't calculated over the last 4 years how much time the street department has put into the parks. But that certainly is some of those labor costs I think we need to consider, because every time the street department is working in the parks, those should be labor costs associated with working in the parks that would be reflected on that. The other thing, I agree that any levy fund should be put into hard improvements in the parks. That's what people see. That's what people start looking at. I've always, you see the signs on the freeways, your tax dollars at work, here's what you're getting. And I know there's been comments or questions I've received about, is the levy going to fund all this labor and improvements? No, it's not. And I wonder if there's any interest amongst council to say, hey, if we do support a levy, all the money is going to go towards programming and hard improvements in the parks, and the city will continue to fund personnel costs. One of the things I look at here is we're talking about maintenance, and it costs $189,000 to maintain. We have volunteers. That's maintaining status quo. That's not moving stuff forward. We have 2 parks in the city that have, I shouldn't say have nothing. They have fields, they have woods, and they have a pond. But there's nothing being done to them. And maintaining status quo, they're not going to be done. So I think that's the question. Where do we want the parks to go? What do we want moving forward? And how do we want to maintain, or how do we want to structure funding to get that stuff done?
Do you have a question, Ian?
Well, I'm going to dovetail off what BJ said. There is some thought to that seeing maintenance, seeing personnel, seeing individuals being paid for out of levy. I would want to not have that happen as quickly as maybe we would if we totally cut off funding from the general fund. My thought would be, and I've kind of talked a little bit with BJ about this, would be that the first 4 years, the money that was generated from the levy would go totally to the improvements that are proposed, the $1 million worth of improvements, and that the general fund would continue to fund the level that it's at now, slightly lower only because it doesn't have projects to pay for. But the 100,000 or 120 or 130, whatever the personnel is needed for the parks, would be funded through the general fund, and the levy would take over and fund all of the projects that could be done in 4 years, roughly. Once that's accomplished, I think you can then look to the levy to pay for the personnel. Come back to that levy at $250,000, which I think goes to a couple of the questions that were asked. Why did you pick? Why is 0.75 make sense? Well, if you think about all the projects, all the major projects being completed, what do you really need? And this goes to your exact question. Right. What do you need at that point to fund the parks? Well, $250,000 seems like a reasonable number to fund the maintenance personnel and a small amount of projects, $50,000 to $60,000 worth of projects per year for upkeep. Are we going to have any big projects that come up, through the next 20 years? Of course we are. But this gives a really good chance of getting ahead of the maintenance curve that we're behind right now, horribly behind, and also gives money to put some more programs out there. I think the numbers, as you'll see in the packet, you've got $830,000 worth of projects. That leaves about $170,000 for programs. And programs take money to get started. And if you can do programs and projects in that first 4 years, I think you're going to make a huge impact to the city. And I'll continue on my soapbox. As they have stated, the economic development factor that continues to dovetail into bringing more businesses and so forth. It's a growth, it's a growth engine for the city, in my opinion.
And I don't doubt that at all. From the moment you guys sat down and started, for me, most of my questions now roll into questions like, who's gonna, if we choose to do this, knowing that we can't, who's gonna run, have you guys thought about who's gonna run the campaign? When you go to talk to people and they say, okay, what am I gonna get for this? Are you gonna target the west side different than the east side? Are you gonna come up with your own ramp and say these different things are,
I've got an acronym for it.
I have exactly those same set of questions. Thank you, Mr. Hicken, for asking them.
I think one of the things the board has discussed is that should council choose to go forward with this, that we have all, or at least most of us, I believe, have identified people that would want to serve as levy part of that motion, because we be a part of it either. And then other question was that we have
West versus east side, how would you?
Well, just, yeah, how you're gonna roll it out. Look, you guys know, because at least some of you know, that historically this community has not supported its parks levies. The last 7, right? So from when I first got here, and it wasn't for lack of trying from the people on that board. The east side and the west side of the city sometimes came in at odds as to where that support went.
Well, I think one of the things, and I'll share with what we've kind of been talking about, was we do have the trail going in on the west side.
Well, that's good.
And I think that one thing that would be done is meeting with the HOAs on the west side and letting them know that, and if you look at the packet provided, the majority of the massive projects, as I would term massive in are on the west side. The connecting issue, the trail around Liberty Park, giving Citizens Park an identity. We have if we had an influx of a massive amount and a donation, we could actually do the master plan of Freedom Park. We did that in the packet tonight, a $320,000 project. So the Freedom kind of looks like this right now. And the red just identifies, the ball fields out there. And there's really not much. We have a little shelter house and a little parking area. I'm going to leave this here. We've kind of been working on something for that park, and there's different colored versions, and I don't know, you guys can just pass them around. But there's the master plan. We're looking at a trail around the park. We're looking at a ball field. We're looking at lights, and we're going to increase the amount of parking over there. We're going to put some wasted space down there. Now, this plan is a slightly older plan, and we had some input from a seasoned civil engineer that we think we could make it a little bit more space effective and put a little bit more stuff in there. So, overlap. But so we're showing you that so that you understand we've been really working on this. This goes back like 3 years since I've been on the park board.
And I know,
If
to your
I'm a-
question, yeah.
If I'm a citizen and you hand me this, what I see here is, if I vote for the levy, I get a baseball field.
We will probably, this is for our planning purposes. I think that what we need to do is target what we can do, put all of the top priority things that they can see us do. Like, we really think that a walking path around Freedom Park that connects to the Taylor Road walking path, it would be something that they can see and they could experience. I mean, a lot of people use Foundation.
But I'm thinking of it more in line of what you're going to say, we really aren't going to say anything because none of us can, but, is there a top hit list? You've got your list of everything that needs done in every park. Is there these are the things that you can expect if this levy is passed? I assume you guys will come up with something along those lines?
There have to be a timetable that you present to everybody that says, you know, hey, if you're Freedom Park, you can expect this in the next 2 years.
I think
And then we gotta deliver.
I think the first step is we need to, whether or not we'll put a levy on the ballot, amount, whatever council determines and how it'll be funded. And after, since 2008, there's, at least Jenny and I, and as everybody came forward, we have folders and folders of potential ways to assist a levy committee. We are quite prepared to, because quite frankly, we've lived and breathed no. So we know it. I could, and if I could see the clicker better, I have 986 pictures of, and I think some of that you will see, because from the standpoint of those of us who've been in there and lived through the 3 times around the shelter era.
Yeah.
I think the impact that we can have with I don't say marketing, advertising, however, to get the information out. We have, fortunately or unfortunately, the history to show that we're in a position, they were in a state that was unacceptable. A group of people got together, the board got together, the community got together and rallied behind it, and now it's time to move it to the next step. And the community will own it and will continue to own it, and that's where we would probably.
Yeah, I think a big part of your history when you talk about this is going to be that it's relied on donations and service groups over the years, and not only are they getting burnt out, but I don't know if we use that term, but it's time to be able to, like Dave's, would Dave's position go to full-time with the levy?
Dave is
Yeah.
Dave is full-time, okay.
I mean, that's premature at this point, but you're right, you know, the volunteers are not sustainable.
Right.
They're not.
How much time? Yeah, there's a couple people that said they had to leave.
I do, and I had a question real quick, if that's okay. I have a question real quick I want to get off before, I'm sorry, I have another meeting I have to go to, I've had scheduled. I've got a question and a comment. And this is kind of, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, Jamie and BJ, but I'm just thinking, kind of piggybacking off of your comment and Andy's. If we were to keep the salaries in our budget, could we drop, would you guys, and this is just something to think about, could we drop back down to the $500,000?
I guess
it would
it-
just extend out the time frame of getting the projects done to make.
Well, if we
And
drop
we're just talking
salaries out of it, if we drop salaries, because that sheet said there was still 100,000 of that.
Yeah.
So if we drop salaries out of it and back into ours,
I think, go ahead.
If I
does that
could
make sense?
Clarify, just, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Dave's salary and benefits is currently split 50-50 between the general fund and the recreation fund.
Gotcha.
So, and there's $10,000 in this year that's being transferred from the general fund to supplement the recreation fund, so just in terms of funds.
Understood.
But what you're saying is if you pull all that out.
That and
of the
another,
park fund, and the, all salaries out of the park
all
fund.
salaries out of this.
Could we drop down to a 0.5?
If we can, if that's, and I don't want to put you on the spot because I don't think you can answer that right now.
I
but
mean, a 0.5 certainly is more funding than we have right now for the parks.
does that make sense? Though what I'm saying is if we pull the salaries, all the salaries out of this,
Well, per Andy's comment is that, you know, $1 million in 4 years, we can do a lot of stuff. If we pulled the salaries out and we got 252 out of, for 4 years, that gives us $1 million to fix and improve and do all the things that we should have been doing before. If you go down to 0.5, and I can't see it from.
168.
Then that means that if it's 4 years at 252, it's going to be 6 years or 7 years at the $500,000.
but you're pulling $100,000 out of that. Am I wrong?
No.
The way I was doing my math, Tommy, was I was already pulling all the salaries
You
out.
already pulled-
and
Already
saying-
out.
And the only other thing that I would point out is, after that 4 years, or after whatever term you want to put on that, you still have to go back to the full funding. The idea is you're going to have maintenance, you're going to have these continuing costs.
Right.
And unless council from here on is going to say, we're always going to pay the salaries of the maintenance people, then you're going to get stuck, you're going to get shorted when you have to go back, if you have to go back to this permanent funding to fund those items.
Makes sense, and like with when you were saying you're already pulling out, and I'm not against this 0.75, I just thought it might be, if we were able to go back to the half, we might be able to sell it easier to the public and still.
No question.
But that makes sense. Thank you. The only other thing I wanted to say before I have to take off is I want to thank you all. I know how hard you guys work on this. I'm a big park supporter. I'd still like, to hear a few more details, but, when the time comes, I'm always going to support the parks, and I just want to thank you all for doing what you guys are doing. So feel free to reach out if you need anything. Thank you.
You have a parting shot there, Mr. Hicken? I know you're both leaving.
I'm in the same boat as Tom. I think I'm sad that I have to leave. I know that it's unavoidable, but the other thing, maybe the answer for me to get some of my other questions answered. The only other one I really have deals with what's the hurry? What is the hurry to get it on now? We're in a community that just approved 2 school board levies. And what do you think, and this is just a legitimate, almost rhetorical question, what do you think the public's view is going to be of, I just paid $6 million, I just took this hit, and I voted yes for it, I supported something, can I do it? Can I flip right around and do it again? Do you think that will hurt you? I understand that the real benefit is if you pass it this year, you get the money at the beginning of next year. If you pass it in the spring, you don't get the money till, but that's the only kind of other question that I have, because I am with Tom. I think whether it's 0.75 or whether we end up at 1 or 0.50, I too support it, and I would probably vote to put it on. My only question is when do you think, when do we think is the best time as a group, as all of us together? So.
Okay. You guys are both excused.
Yeah, and sorry for having to leave.
Real quick, though, I didn't know if you wanted to comment.
I just wanted to add a couple things. The one thing we haven't really talked about, and we've had plenty of recreation, plenty of maintenance, but the activities that are going on. Tim, you made a comment about how 7 park levies went down in flames, and they did back in 2003 through 2008 or whatever the case was. But I would point out there's a huge difference between 2008 and 2017, and the difference is the amount of activities that have been in the parks and the amount of public versus private community activities, and we're quasi-public activities. I mean, the fireworks, the tractor pools, the Easter egg hunts, all that stuff is really public now. It's not as much private as it was maybe 5 years ago. So again, there's a lot more activities even that could be done, and they could be done bigger. And they will be done bigger because the community wants it. And I think just being out in the parks and listening to the rec people and listening to the activity people, it grows every year. That's not, probably conservative estimates at best, but the pool, we're just seeing it constantly on all aspects, it growing. So I think to answer your question about November, it's really time to either try to cap it and stop it from growing, because we're going to be limited on funds and we're going to be limited on what we can do, or it's time to say we're going to go forward and go to the next level and take it to even a bigger program and activity. And that's really where I think the community is.
That's the argument that you should make to the public.
That's exactly the argument that I would make.
Can I just ask something? You brought it up, and I really got to go, but it brought up a really good question. You guys have done great things with the pool, but that's the same pool that I swam in when I was a kid. The community's grown a lot since I've been a kid, and we're still swimming in the same pool. I didn't see it in the packet, but would that be more of something? Would there be any way to do something with the pool in this, or is that more of a fundraising thing that you see going another direction?
It's a different function. You can go and get a special Groveport. Some of the other communities have gone and gotten a separate funding for just a recreation center.
All right, we need that.
Before you leave, I just have one. I have been on this park board for almost 20 years. I've seen a lot of it. I've seen the worst of it, and I see it getting better. I think by our volunteers stepping up, our community got more active in our parks, and I think the community has the ability to pass this levy.
I don't disagree.
I don't disagree either. Although having been involved, as you know, in the other 7 failed ones, I thought they were ready then too, so.
Mrs. Carter? Thank you, guys.
I would just say that there is a lot of community activities, but if you're going to get it to pass, you're going to have to sell the west side on what's going to end up over there. There are no activities on the west side of town. There's not a pool, not even an old pool. There's no ball games. There's no walking trails. There's nothing. So if it's going to sell for people, again, who just passed a school levy, there's going to have to be a commitment to that section of town that there's going to be some improvements.
Mr. Barstow?
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I think that what I would like to have seen, I guess, this evening was a prioritization, a ramp-style plan. This is, you identified 800, I counted up $700,000, maybe it's 800,000, maybe it's $1 million, of projects where they, if this levy is passed, how are those, in what order are those projects going to be funded? And, I mean, look, in a few months, I'm going to be walking around the city myself, and I'm going to get questions about where's this park levy is on the ballot, where's our money going to go? And I want to have a rational answer to voters who say, where's my, whatever it's going to be, $35 in taxes, where's it going to go? What am I going to get for it? Whether I'm going to live on the west side or the east side. So that's, to me, that would be the best way to convince voters to vote for this. What are we going to get for our tax dollars? And I tend to agree with Mr. Walther's contention that in the first few years, I think the city could bear the cost at the 3/4 levy, bear the cost of employees. And again, I'm not attacking employees. I was just wondering, again, my confusion was we had 1.5 employees that were going to cost us $200,000 a year. I just wondered how that was, what was going on. That was my question. The employees work very hard and they deserve the money that they get, but I was just wondering how that was working out. And Mrs. Carter has apologized to me profusely for leading me down a false path. But I think that we could. I think the city could do that, and then get these projects going. We know what the road projects are like. They never end. It's as soon as one road gets paved, there's another road that has to do this. And I would prefer to manage larger city functions in this fashion rather than just relying on our income tax. I would have preferred to have done the police station in this manner because it burns a big hole in the budget. But I think that this is something that is needed, and you folks have come to us and said that 3/4 is what you think it will do, and I think that we can come up with a way to do that. But I'd like to see some more concreteness to the plans of saying, you know, in this park we're going to do this. We're going to build a new shelter house in this park. We're going to build a walking trail in this park. I mean, 10 things that you're going to do around in the different parks around the city. So
we're not sure, yes, this body of people isn't exactly sure what council is going forward. So if you want, if you're in agreeance of 0.75 mil, pulling from the general fund, not pulling from the general fund, we're not sure if the council is for a permanent funding source at all. And then from that aspect, we weren't sure. We can provide the 0.75, which would be a reasonable, but it's still the pleasure of council as to what millage they would go. And then when we know, and part of this packet was the idea that these were the priorities for each park. And if we knew what council was saying, yes, we're going to go for 0.5 or 0.75, and all the funding for the employees comes out of the general fund, then we know as a unit, okay, we have X amount of dollars. And then from that standpoint, we would absolutely be able to provide you with a list of what would be, including, you know, do we have any opportunity for grant match? If we're going to build a shelter, could we take 25 and then find a grant for that? So I mean, we're kind of essentially we're waiting because we're not sure what the pleasure of council will be for this.
you could do it as some you could make some assumptions and say assumption A is this funding model, 3/4 levy. Council pays personnel costs. This is what we can do. half mil levy, council doesn't, cuts the appropriation,
So three would be, three different ways.
some different ways that you think might, we've discussed some different ideas, so those would be some, I haven't heard any other ideas floated. I don't know what we're going to do. I have no idea. I can only speak for me, so. But I think that would also help if a levy's on the ballot, whether it's in November or May or whenever, that it would help, you'd have some idea of what this is what we're going to do. Okay.
Each of us can take in a part.
Okay.
And I think that those that are specifically identified people of the board we're just standing ready to do something
Okay.
like that. And we will certainly present, something and on what, do you believe these priorities are ones that you see? And certainly Carter will know whether or not, Woodland Park is more interested in the service or are they more interested in the shelter? Because we're not going to be able to do, under some of those assumptions, we're not going to be able to do all of it.
Right.
On the one that Andy presented, we might be able to do a park a year. We might be able to put a bunch of different things in, one park a year and then do some really good maintenance
Okay.
on another park.
Right. Thank you.
I just, I think in BJ's legislative report, he gave us kind of a timeline on this, and I didn't know if you'd seen that. Yeah, and so gets a little tight, or at least the way I'm reading it, it gets a little tight, with putting the levy on the ballot, or at least getting it through the first readings. To get that information, would that be something you'd want to see during that first reading, or would you want to see it before that first reading to be able to put, and I know I'm probably jumping in front of you, BJ, I'm
Nope,
sorry.
not at all. I just wanted to mention one thing, but
Go ahead, BJ.
Go ahead.
Are you done?
I'm done with my question.
It is
right
certainly tight. This schedule that I laid out, I worked from the August 9th deadline backwards. And first thing I did was give us a month buffer to get language to the elections board to make sure that what we present is acceptable and it's not kicked back. If it is kicked back, it allows us to go ahead and modify it. May 1st, I had legislation to certify millage rates. By certifying millage rates doesn't mean we have to place it on the ballot. All we're saying is, hey, go ahead and certify what 1 mill, based on our current valuation, is doing. So that's a step we could do regardless. If we decide to go in November, that's great. If we decide to go in May, we'll just do it again in December. This schedule just gets moved forward. So I would recommend that we go ahead and get language together to present to council to certify a mill. That's the first step. Doesn't mean we have to place it on, doesn't mean what percentage we need to place on. We're not certifying what the certain percentage will be. We're just certifying what the millage is. Okay. And, each time, go ahead.
If are you done with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is a suggested approach, similar to what the RAMP program did when it was initially established. The process was, let's look at every road in the city, what's the condition? Right. Here is the horrible monster list of every project we have to fund. Okay, what are the priorities? And then literally through the budget process, it becomes like a Jenga game or a Tetris where you're trying to make it fit and move things around. So, I'd be less concerned about saying, here's which projects you'd fund in year 1 versus year 2. What I would suggest you might come up with is, here's the master list, and it'll all depend with prioritization. And so you basically say, okay, if you have $250,000, this is basically where the line goes. You may have to move a thing in or out just because you want to have somebody on the west side versus the old village center.
Right.
You can do some of that, but if you focus more on what is the scope of the nut, if you will, versus how it's going to be processed, I think that'll be a very productive exercise.
Which I think is in this packet. I think that's,
We have a lot of
it's,
information already started.
Yeah, the list, the big old list is there,
right,
but there's no indication as
just
to
needs to be,
where we have to do this shelter house has got to be done because and I'm just making things up, because it's going to fall down, or this trail needs to be done because we get constant complaints from users that why isn't there a trail, or it's there but it's in very poor condition, or something like that. So that, yeah, yes, you have you've got the big list, but where's it going to go? And I think that if you want to convince someone to vote for the levy, or just to give them information, they're going to want to know, what am I going to get? What am I buying here? So, I mean,
But I think we have to be really honest, though, because a lot of it's just going to be maintenance.
Well,
Because we're
I-
behind
I-
on maintenance.
Yeah, it's not, a lot of it's,
Right.
and that was one of the things that
Well-
we really, I mean, I think that the idea of allowing the general fund to fund the salaries and some of the maintenance and take all of the levy money and start putting into something people can see. This is what we're doing for you.
Right.
You gave us some money, we're doing this for you. And that is so important.
it's no different than fixing potholes and culverts and all of the other, just incredibly exciting things that we do as the city to keep things rolling. I mean, it's not, fixing potholes not very
Yeah,
sexy.
careful now. Andy does get excited.
do get
about
excited
road-
about
But no, but
We love running the city.
to the board's point, people notice. People notice when there's a trust me, they notice when there's a pothole in their street, and they will notice when when things are getting painted.
I think we'd have to find a way to balance, telling people that, yes, we need maintenance, but then there's a Frisbee park along with that maintenance, or there's a new pool on the west side, or you kind of mix and match. Because again, as somebody that's helped maintain those parks, they constantly need maintenance to stay in the shape that they're in. So, we just have to be, yes, sir.
Couple things. I think I would hesitate to start saying you're going to get maintenance of the parks out of this levy, because somebody could say, well, we get that now, because they're seeing the mowing, they're seeing trimming, they're seeing that stuff. I think that the prioritization that Todd's talking about is certainly important, because if you say, hey, you want to shelter, we're priority number one is a shelter in Liberty Park, we can do that at this rate. And if it's a different rate, we're going to have to postpone that for a couple of years. So I think the prioritization is really important to do. I think that, I almost think this doesn't lend its, the ramp is good because the ramp says what needs to be done and when, in a perfect world, it should be done. I think this almost has to be that perfect world to say, hey, at this rate, this is when this thing will be done.
Our ramp has changed 1,000,000 times over the years.
Right, it does. And that's the hard thing. People call in and say, hey, when's my road going to get done? Well, we can say, based on this, it should be done, should have been done in a perfect world in year 3. But funding doesn't allow for that. This gives us the opportunity to look at that funding and say, hey, if this is approved, we know we're going to get $252,000 in the first year. So we're going to be able to build that shelter. We're going to be able to do that trail. So I think the prioritization that Todd is talking about is good I don't want to say an easy thing, is something that is realistic to do based on taking that funding structure and how much is, a shelter going to cost? How much is a trail going to cost? And be able to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Maybe it's a shelter. Maybe maybe year 1 is a shelter in Liberty and Citizens Park, and that's what we're going to get out of this. And I'm spitballing right now with ideas, but I think prioritizing, and that helps everybody then to be able to say, here's what you're going to get for this levy money. It's the hard improvements that you're getting beyond the maintenance, beyond the programs. You're going to see this coming out of the ground with your levy money at work. And I keep going back, you see the signs on the freeways, your tax money at work. That's what this is. With levy money, if we're going to put it towards hard improvements in the park, which is what we're lacking significantly, especially we have 2 parks, again, that have nothing in them but a pond and a field. That's what we need to show folks, that they're going to get for this stuff over a certain period of time.
Anything else?
We have the luxury of having the City of Reynoldsburg park member, with us tonight, and so if you wanted to ask him any questions about what they're doing in their park system, he's a wealth of knowledge. I know well, do you want to tell a little bit about your park system, and then if they have any more questions? I'm just,
I can. I mean, it just depends on what would be pertinent or.
how many people work full-time?
Well, what's your, the acreage of parks that you guys have versus Pataskala? How many people, how you're funded, that sort of thing.
Brownsburg is funded from the general fund. Their cost recovery is about 70% from programming and sponsorships, some stuff like that, donations every now and then. Their budget was just under $1 million a year.
That's just to support the parks.
That is direct fund from the general fund, correct? For operations, it's no capital money at all. We've got really got any capital money for improvements in a long time. So you're looking at a director, a recreation superintendent, part-time rec staff, some in the office to help with administrative necessities of the recreation program, site supervisors that are actually out at the fields that deal with any issues, kind of supervisory position to make sure your umpires show up, your referee shows up, things like that, open the facilities, make sure there's no issues. Then that's on the rec side. We have an admin assistant. We have myself, the ground superintendent. Under me, I have a crew leader, a horticulturalist, since we do beautification tasks such as like hanging baskets. We do annual plantings, a lot of landscape maintenance around the parks. And I just added from 3/4 time to full time maintenance positions. I have 2. So in the general grounds operations, I have 5. Counting myself, I have 5. And we are from where we are through programming and just the tasks we have at hand, we're understaffed with 5. I usually get between 5 to 8 seasonals a year. Recently, in the past couple years, it's been more difficult to get your seasonals. Some of the healthcare regulations and stuff.
Sure.
That has changed the window and narrowed the hours you can offer them a week. You can only, I found it very difficult to get maintenance seasonals from March to November. I can get some returning college kids. I can get some teachers for a 2.5 month window in the summer. And we utilize those the best we can. So I mean that's kind of how we lay out. We have 7 parks, 275 acres. We have 19 ball fields, which is an enormous amount of ball fields to have. 85 of that is maintained, what I would call maintained mowed turf. Break that down to about 30 acres that we fertilize, do broadleaf weed control. Over the past couple years, we've had an aggressive overseeding program. I'm trying to think what else. We have 2 community gardens. We have a historical house we maintain.
Well,
Hopefully that
No, that helps. So 274, and what do we have? What's that?
178.
178, okay.
And I can just, to give you, from where I stepped in that position in 2013 as the new director, they one issue that pops out of my head, they had done no tree maintenance for a long time. Aside from when tree would fall, we cut it up, hauled off. In the past several years, we budget for about $20,000 in contracted tree work every year. We chewed through that in April with just, hey, let's go look at this. This is a handful of projects. Got that tree work done. We did in-house pruning. We spent a week doing some in-house pruning, and we do about 500 trees since I've been there. That $100,000 of operational funds could be easily chewed up. There's been really, just with tree work, you could chew up 1/5 of that and not really see a visible dent in 1 year. To frame of reference. And because, we chew up, like I said, we spent $20,000 in contracted tree work. It's hard to see a dent. and we've done it now for a couple years. So because of the lack of care, and I'm talking about clearing, removing ash trees, thinning, structural pruning, things of that nature.
Any questions? Well, that helps give us a little insight on.
What we don't have.
And one thing I have noticed, because we're
Treating for
always
weeds.
looking for ways to streamline our operation, is that every maintenance every need from neighborhood to neighborhood, direction right next to one another, they're structurally different. So how Pasco would structure itself would be way different than Realmsburg, or like we're different from, let's say, Pickerington, and we're different from like Anna, Westerville. You know, every single department, however the two bodies decide to organize that department, there's no set map of how to do it. It's just whatever works best in that community is.
Sure. Else?
You're all a plethora of information, so.
BJ has.
My only question is, again, back to the schedule that we presented, is there any desire by council to consider legislation for the county auditor to certify what a mill collects? This time I was thinking May 15th, or would we like to hold off on that?
Got a nod from Mrs. Carter. Mr. Barstow?
Yeah, I just have a question. Do we need to do that as two separate pieces of legislation, or do you need legislation from us, and what do you need from us to go to the auditor to get certification?
Approved legislation.
So you need an ordinance from us? Or do you?
I believe it's a resolution.
Resolution?
Yeah, I believe it's a resolution.
Kathy says it's a resolution?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the ballot language is an ordinance, but
Right.
the certification is a resolution.
Mr. Powell, Andy, you guys?
I'm in favor of doing that, yes.
Absolutely.
Todd?
I am, yeah, so.
Okay, appreciate it.
Do you wanna
That's
motion
the
it all,
direction
or
we'll
you-
head.
Do we need
okay with-
you're gonna bring a resolution on the 5th, next week?
I would like, let's do this. Good point, motion directing the administration to present
Got a motion?
legislation.
Got a
to-
second? Got a second?
Yeah.
Andy was first, Todd was second. Discussion? And roll.
Powell,
Yes.
Hayes, oh, she's gone. Barstow.
Yes.
Walther.
Yes?
Carter.
Yes.
Compton? Yes. Get the vote. Okay, motion passes. So you'll,
I have nothing further, so.
okay. Yes, ma'am.
Just so council knows, all of us here, including Corey, would like to let you know that if you have any questions, please. Each of us has taken a portion of things. Jenny has multiple history and can serve as a good resource for the previous levies and also for a lot of the history in the parks itself. And then, so we would be happy to answer any questions as we move forward. Any thing about other parks, I've gathered multiple information about how other parks are funded, certain budgetary things, I have examples. So please use us as a resource. We would really like that. At your disposal.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's a lot of work to put all this stuff together, and I appreciate you coming and answering questions, and it was very informative. So again, everyone, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, much needed, a good place to start, and we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah,
Andy?
I'm just going to add too, being part of it 10 years ago and having a very vivid memory of what the parks look like and what the pool looked like and so forth. What the park board has done, what the administration has done, and what the previous council had allowed to occur through the volunteers, we wouldn't be here if that hadn't happened. So, obviously, to everybody that put in time and put in effort, including majorly the park board, appreciate all your guys' help.
Anything, Mike?
Thanks for your commitment to the city and making it better. Thank you.
Mel, anything?
I'm a regular cheerleader, so you guys already know how I feel.
Okay, anything else from you folks? You need a motion to adjourn?
Do you want them to adjourn
They
first?
need to adjourn first.
They need to
Okay.
adjourn first.
You adjourn first.
A motion to adjourn? Moved. Second? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
And a motion to adjourn from
Second.
Andy, second from Mrs. Carter. Discussion and roll, please.
Powell?
Yes.
Barstow?
Yes.
Walters?
Yes?
Carter?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
You can. I'll do my best to answer.
So, and
They did what? A debt beat. Okay.
the neighbors got tired of it. They started cutting and he called the police.
Yeah, he's trespassing.
Yes. So,
Because we call